told anyone this, but my husband and I came to an arrangement when we had our first child that I would do the night feeds and he would wake up around 5:30 to take our baby girl downstairs for her morning feed, leaving me to get a few hours uninterrupted rest before he starts work for the day. Well, around 10 weeks, baby girl dropped her night feeds and I had a blissful sleep. Woo! Plus, additional lying time most days after telling my husband how awful my night had been and him thanking me for being so quiet as he had no idea it was such a struggle. This is genius! I don't regret it at all. Ladies, we go through enough.
Here's the thing about sentences that start with, I've never told anyone this, but there's a reason that you kept that to yourself, and the ugliness of that reason doesn't just expire because time passed. It's one thing to come to an agreement with your spouse about chores and tasks. That's a very good thing. It's another thing if one of your tasks starts to naturally become easier and you enjoy the benefits of that, and that's totally fine. But then it's a whole other thing to then lie to your spouse about all of these hardships you're enduring because of this task when that task doesn't even exist for you anymore. That's not a mom hack. That's not even something to be proud of. That is a-hole behavior. When a man ends up having a half day at work, so he spends the rest of it golfing and drinking with his buddies, but then he comes home to his wife and he lies and he says, work was so exhausting. They had me on my feet all day, breaking my back. I simply cannot do any chores around the house. We would rightfully call him out for mistreating his wife. But when these women execute the exact same manipulative behaviors, it's what? Goals? They get to go on a podcast and be called queens for it? And to be clear, no one is mad at the mom for not telling the dad that the baby hasn't been feeding throughout the night. Moms need sleep. Science proves they need even more postpartum. No one's even asking her to replace that task with another task. What's gross and inappropriate is playing victim and pretending bad things are happening to you that aren't, just to gain sympathy. And then go on a show and teach other people how to lie and manipulate for sympathy as a mom hack. I guarantee you that if either of these women were to see their man admit to some BS like this, they would never trust him again. But it's not the same on both sides, because when she goes home after recording that podcast and her husband isn't exactly in the most lovey-dovey mood after hearing that, it's going to be shocked Pikachu face, why are you so mad about that? It was so long ago. The other thing these women are totally not even considering is the emotional and physical stress men are under when they're worried about their wife. This whole time she's crying wolf, she's sending her husband into work feeling like dog shit, racked with guilt, worried about how she's doing, worried that she's not sleeping enough, that the baby's not going to be okay, wrecked with anxiety. When she could have just said, thank you for taking the early morning feeding shifts. It's helping me get more rest. Would have had the same beneficial dynamic to your sleep schedule, zero manipulation, and the added bonus of practicing gratitude in your relationship. Moms do have it hard enough. We have it so hard enough that we don't have to lie about extra stuff.
Men don't feel valued in today's society.
I agree completely.
Hit me with it.
I don't think he's gonna agree at all.
Solve a problem, their partner is constantly coming up with a new one.
Okay, I'm already confused, because don't these guys usually complain that we need to feel useful and needed?
Okay, so right off the jump, he hits her with these types. What types? So far, I only see one unique individual woman expressing her own observations. We're 2 seconds in, and he thinks he has her totally pegged.
They don't feel like they can talk to women or go out in public looking left or right without someone thinking they're harassing them.
I've never been shouted at or accused of approaching a stranger. This is an imaginary problem that has been made up by men who are just upset that they can't catcall and hit on women at a time and place of their choosing.
This right here is called the logical fallacy of personal incredulity. This never happened to Neil, so it must have never happened to Emmett Till. His life ending due to false allegations was just imaginary, I guess. You also just seamlessly conflated her words, talking to women, with literal catcalling. So I think you just perfectly demonstrated the problem men are having with society being unable to differentiate the two.
Is a babysitter for their own child and less worthy than a mother.
We can complain about being called babysitters to our own kids when we stop acting like we are babysitters to our own kids.
Neil is now going to go on to justify one of the most offensive things to me, which is that men deserve to be called babysitters of their own kids. And why is that? Well, because some men are incompetent. And as the nail in the coffin of his argument, he uses the nacho plate wife example from TikTok, an example that is from a satire account and didn't actually happen. Neil himself goes on to cite statistics that indicate men are exponentially more involved now as parents than ever before, but go figure, doesn't value it, while trying to argue that men don't have the right to complain about feeling unvalued.
It's usually always side with the woman when it comes to divorce and custody.
Dads usually get some form of custody when they ask for it. a lot of them just don't ask.
Neil is 100% correct here that more men should ask for custody. However, the stats of shared custody are still a tough pill for dads to swallow. Last I checked, of all litigated cases in the United States, of fathers who requested custody, 50% got some form of custody. That means that half of the dads who fight for it still end up non-custodial. And dads who do get custody still, on average, are only awarded 30% of the time. And while there may be some basis that a lot of men work too much for 50-50 parenting time to work, the point remains. Men feel less valued for their parenting than they do for their earning power, and it still sucks.
And on top of that, they're expected to be the sole provider, be 6 foot, and make 6 figures.
That requirement is just a fantasy that exists in the imaginations of men who need an excuse to explain why they can't get laid.
Then why did you just hear it from a woman? This very non-imaginary survey from Bumble found that 60% of women indicate they're looking for a man over 6 feet tall. This study seems to indicate that.
How much money do you think a guy should make per year? It'd be nice if they were at least making 100,000. Like $1 million, $2 million, 300K.
I think that so much of what Professor Neil does to bring awareness to women's issues is really awesome, but like, dude, come on. You did not have to invalidate men's very valid feelings to do that. I can tell you pretty confidently whether you would be more or less compatible with someone based entirely off of this Venn diagram. This is a simple graphic that I made called the Cleaning Compatibility Venn diagram. Your cleaning style is going to fall into one of these 3 categories: type A, type B, and type ADHD. 2 type A's are almost the most compatible. These 2 have the highest probability of actually making each other happy in a domestic living situation. The big caveat here is that one of them must be crowned the cleaner one, and they will fight about this until the day they die. A type A can, on a rare occasion, find themselves compatible with a type ADHD. However, these 2 are the most likely to fight just because they view cleaning and organization in such radically different ways. It's not that one is right and one is wrong, but they are to each other. Type Bs are compatible with just about every other type out there. They're like the blood type O negative of the domestic engineering world. They'll just fit in wherever. Type Bs are just flexible enough to barely reach that type A criteria while also being lackadaisical enough to not really mind the shitstorm that falls under the type ADHD umbrella. 2 type Bs together are just vibes. Now, you might think that 2 type ADHDs would be compatible, but they might actually drive each other crazier than a type A type ADHD combo. There are just so many different ways to have ADHD that it's a lot like putting a baseball player and a hockey player in the same arena and then telling them to play lacrosse. Maybe it'll work out, and maybe not. At the end of the day, any one of these typecastings will either thrive or fail based on 2 factors. 1, are they willing to meet somewhere in the middle? And 2, are they willing to agree not to ask the other person to change who they are or lower their standards? Because when someone has a standard or a method that works for them, you can't just ask to take that away from them. Lowering your standards or giving up a methodology that keeps you sane isn't compromise, it's just sacrificing your identity. This applies to both type A's who don't need to clean up messes they didn't make, and to type ADHDs who need some doom piles here and there to stay productive. Just remember, finding someone who's compatible with you is hard, but it's a lot harder to try and change someone into something they're not. When am I going to stop advocating for men? Well, maybe when this stops turning into this. When your girlfriend gets mad again. This is Nick. Nick is obviously an incredibly jacked dude, but that did not stop him from having evidence of his girlfriend's recent horrific attack of him that he posted last night, September 27th. The video that I posted earlier was shared only 3 days prior. And this is right
I wonder
after.
who that would have been.
Oh, man.
Right? My face was bad, doesn't it?
It was terrible.
Why does she look so
Okay, so-
smug?
You think I'm fucking judging?
So that was last night, and this is how we're looking today.
First of all, right off the jump, to the people in the comment section saying, well, what did he do first to her? What is wrong with you? Like, actually, what is wrong with your brain? We all know that men can be dangerous, but something in society allowed this woman to not only believe that she could lay hands on that man in that way, causing him to walk out of whatever altercation they got into looking worse than most MMA fighters leave a ring. And not only that, but something in society perpetuated the notion that allowed her to so smugly stand here and smile and laugh about it after the fact. You can say the last thing men need is platforms and spaces to center themselves, but something in society forced this man to be quiet when there were clearly warning signs. Nick should not have to look like the rainbow fish for you guys to listen to men. What happened to Nick can be avoided through very simple measures. Simply listening to men when they start to open up, or even believing them when they start to tell you about a bad situation instead of dismissing them because women can never be the bad guys. Oh, and here's a fun bonus question. Where could Nick have gone to protect himself from that abuse? Do you know where your local men's shelter is? You probably don't, because there are only 2 in the entire United States. I just know that I'm going to remain haunted by Nick's caption on this video, which is, "It hurts so bad that TikTok is the only place that will hug me." Here's Nick's profile again, so you can show him some love and give him some virtual hugs. But more importantly, find the Nicks that you do know and give them some real hugs before shit goes down.